Some souls wait in silence, and sometimes their patience teaches us more than any command ever could. Ghost, a striking white German shepherd with fur that shimmered like fresh snow, sat unwavering at the edge of the Marine Corps base gate, paws tucked neatly beneath him, ears pricked against the chill morning air. For 7 days, he refused to move, rain cascading over his sleek coat, droplets sliding down the ridge of his back, the cold biting at the tips of his ears, yet he remained. The hum of distant traffic and the occasional bark from other dogs on the base were mere background noise to him. His focus was absolute, his amber eyes scanning each passing figure, searching for something or someone familiar. Jared Thompson, a tall, broad-shouldered Marine with dark skin that glowed even under the pale dawn light, stepped out from the shadows of the guardhouse, his boots crunching softly on the gravel path leading to the gate. He had heard the murmurs from his fellow Marines, whispers about a lone K-9 who refused to leave, but he had not expected to see the white dog sitting there like a sentinel, tail curled neatly, as if time itself had no hold over him. The drizzle clung to the edges of Jared's jacket, the scent of wet asphalt and pine mingling in the morning air, bringing with it a memory of distant deployments, sand and salt, and the taste of survival. Ghost's gaze locked onto Jared the moment he drew near, nostrils flaring subtly, whiskers twitching in recognition, yet he did not move forward, did not jump into Jared's arms, only held the space between them taut with expectation. Each step Jared took towards the gate was measured, careful, the soft scuff of his boots blending with the rhythmic tapping of rain against the metal fencing. He could feel the quiet tension emanating from the dog, a silent communication that required no words, no commands. Ghost's chest rose and fell slowly, deliberately, as if breathing out decades of patience and loyalty in every exhale. The gate loomed before them, iron bars streaked with rainwater, shadows shifting as morning light filtered through the clouds. Yet the space felt sacred, a small world within which only Marine and K-9 existed. Jared crouched slightly, reaching a hand towards Ghost without breaking eye contact, letting his presence be known without force. The dog's ears flicked, tail swayed minutely, and a faint whine escaped, barely audible, carried off by the wind. Something small and rectangular hung from Ghost's collar, soaked by rain, ink smudged but still legible, a message tied with fraying string, whispering stories of separation and hope. The subtle scent of the paper mixed with the wet fur, carrying with it a promise, a memory of bonds tested and unbroken. Around them, the world blurred, raindrops hanging in the air like tiny prisms, distant chatter fading to insignificance, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and the faint tang of metal from the gate. Ghost shifted slightly, a deliberate, almost imperceptible step closer, his eyes never leaving Jared's, amber orbs reflecting trust, expectation, and an unspoken plea. Time seemed to dilate, seconds stretching like hours, as the rain continued to fall in steady rhythm, the chill biting, but not enough to break the tableau of unwavering patience and looming reunion. Each heartbeat of Jared's was mirrored in the dog's measured breathing, the space between them charged with an intimacy forged through absence and longing. The small tag swayed gently, hinting at a narrative held tightly in the pause and memory of a faithful companion, a story waiting to unfold with every motion of the tail and flick of attentive ears. The distant hum of the base, trucks starting their morning rounds, radios crackling faintly, all became background to the singular focus shared between man and dog. Jared finally lowered to his knees, extending both hands slowly, palms open, allowing Ghost the first decision in the dance of reunion. The white fur shimmered with rainwater, each droplet catching the muted light of dawn, and for a moment, the world held its breath, waiting for the bond to acknowledge itself once again. Ghost tilted his head, a soft exhale escaping, and then, deliberately, with measured grace, he shifted closer, bringing the story of 7 days, the weight of patient loyalty, and the promise carried on a small collar tag into the shared space of two souls long separated, yet never apart, in essence. The morning had settled into a quiet rhythm over the Marine Corps base, the wet gravel glistening with residual rain, mist curling low across the grounds. Jared Thompson remained on his knees for a moment longer, letting the subtle warmth of Ghost's presence seep through, his palms lightly brushing the silky fur along the dog's shoulders. Around them, the base stirred to life with distant hums of trucks, the faint clatter of boots on concrete, and the occasional bark of other K9s in training yards. Yet none of it broke the intimate bubble surrounding man and dog. Ghost shifted his weight slightly, ears flicking toward a distant gate, as if sensing the echo of voices and footsteps from earlier patrols, a memory woven deep into instinct and loyalty. Jared rose slowly, dusting his knees, each movement deliberate to maintain the fragile connection that had been rekindled. He scanned the tag dangling from Ghost's collar, the paper frayed at the edges, damp but intact enough to reveal words scrawled in careful handwriting. The message, though simple, carried the weight of a promise kept through absence, a note from a fellow Marine who had passed months ago, entrusting Ghost to wait for the one he loved, a silent testimony of trust and devotion that transcended time and circumstance. As Jared followed Ghost toward the gate, the rain had ceased, leaving a soft mist hovering in the cool morning air, the scent of wet pine and salt from the nearby coast lingering in every breath. Each step Jared took, boots pressing into soft gravel, seemed to echo the memories of missions long past, nights spent under foreign skies, and the unwavering companionship of a dog who had seen war and still waited patiently. Ghost led him past the empty training fields, the K9's movements graceful, deliberate, head held high, amber eyes flicking toward Jared as if checking for reassurance. The distant sun broke through the mist in gentle shafts, painting the base in muted gold, catching the white of Ghost's fur and making it glow softly against the gray backdrop. Jared's mind wandered briefly to the long months of separation, the reassignment that had pulled him from the base, the nights haunted by absence, and the quiet gnawing of worry that had never fully faded. Ghost paused at a familiar corner, turning his head to look at Jared with a tilt that carried both patience and anticipation, the small whimper barely audible yet rich with emotion, signaling it was time to proceed. Together, they moved through the corridors of the base toward the administrative area where other Marines were beginning their morning rounds, faces curious and softening as they glimpsed the reunion unfolding before them. The subtle hum of activity, the clatter of pens, the murmur of voices, the creak of doors opening and closing, created a gentle backdrop that contrasted with the intensity of the moment between man and dog. Ghost's paws made soft impressions on the damp concrete, each step measured, carrying the story of days spent waiting, the longing etched into every movement. Jared kept his voice low, soothing, murmuring small reassurances, letting the cadence of speech mirror the rhythm of footsteps, a gentle bridge between human and canine understanding. As they approached a small bench near the main office, Jared knelt once more, letting Ghost settle beside him, the dog's body pressing lightly against his side, a living anchor to the present, a tether to the past, and a promise of companionship renewed. Around them, the base seemed to quiet, the world narrowing to this single shared space of trust, patience, and recognition. Jared lifted his hand to scratch behind Ghost's ears, feeling the warmth and weight of loyalty that had not wavered despite distance, duty, and the relentless march of time. Ghost leaned into the touch, amber eyes soft, ears relaxed yet alert, the small tail thumping against the concrete in subtle excitement. In the midst of the misty morning, with the scent of rain still in the air and the muted gold light bathing the scene, man and dog shared a silence that spoke louder than words, a quiet affirmation that bonds forged in trust and patience are not easily broken, that loyalty can endure months, even years, of absence, and that the smallest acts of devotion carry the weight of miracles waiting to be recognized. Jared stayed beside the bench while the base continued waking around him, but Ghost did not settle the way a tired dog should have settled. His body leaned against Jared for warmth, yet his eyes kept turning toward the Old West training yard, beyond the row of supply buildings and the flagpole where the morning colors had just begun to stir in the damp breeze. Jared noticed it first in the ears. They lifted, then flattened, then lifted again. It was not fear. It was memory. Ghost gave one soft sound from deep in his chest and rose to all fours, the paper tag brushing against the metal loop of his collar with a faint, trembling click. Jared looked down at him and whispered, "What is it, boy?" Ghost took 3 steps away, stopped, and looked back. The gesture was so familiar that it caught Jared somewhere beneath the ribs. Years ago, on another morning under another sky, Ghost had done the same thing whenever he needed Jared to follow him without noise, without hesitation, without questions. The Marine standing near the office door, Corporal Ben Willis, lowered his coffee and watched with a troubled expression. He was a young white Marine from Ohio, narrow-faced, with sandy hair and the kind of restless hands that always wanted a task. "Staff Sergeant Thompson," he said gently. "He has been doing that since the 3rd day. Every time someone tried to bring him inside, he pulled toward the west yard. Would not eat unless the bowl was placed facing that direction." Jared turned toward the line of low buildings half hidden by mist. The west yard had been shut down for repairs after a winter storm damaged the old kennels. Nothing there now but chain link, puddles, faded warning signs, and empty runs where training dogs once learned the discipline of trust. Yet Ghost was staring at it, as if someone had called his name from behind those fences. Jared stood, and the cold air moved through his jacket. "Open the access gate," he said. Corporal Willis hesitated only a breath before nodding. The walk took less than 5 minutes, but each step felt stretched thin by the silence between them. Ghost led the way, white coat glowing against the wet ground, paused silent despite the gravel. Jared followed with 2 other Marines behind him, their voices lowered without anyone telling them to be quiet. The bass sounds faded as they moved away from the main road. No engines, no radios, only the drip of rainwater from gutters, the soft hiss of wind through pine needles, and the steady rhythm of Ghost breathing ahead of them. When they reached the west yard, Ghost stopped so suddenly that Jared nearly stepped into him. The old chain link gate stood closed with a new lock on it, silver and bright against rusted metal. Beyond it, the empty training lanes stretched in rows, their sand dark from rain. At the far end stood kennel number 6, its door half open, moving slightly whenever the wind touched it. Ghost lowered his head. His tail went still. Then he sat. Not like before, not in waiting. This was different. This was a signal. Jared looked at the kennel, then at the paper tied to the collar. The handwriting had blurred from the rain, but one line remained clear enough to read. "Do not let him forget where we made the promise." Jared felt the words enter him slowly, not as information, as a weight. He reached for the latch, but Corporal Willis stepped forward with the key. The lock clicked open, loud in the quiet morning. Ghost slipped through first, then paused again until Jared followed. The smell inside the yard was old sand, wet wood, rubber training mats, and the faint clean trace of disinfectant from years of routines. Ghost moved straight to kennel number 6 and lowered his nose to the crack beneath the door. He did not bark. He only breathed in, long and careful, as if gathering the last remaining pieces of someone he loved. Jared came behind him and touched the door with his fingertips. A small metal plate was still screwed above the frame, dulled by weather. It read Ghost, K9 Unit, paired with Staff Sergeant Jared Thompson and Lance Corporal Michael Reeves. Jared closed his eyes. Michael Reeves. The name did not arrive gently. It came with sunlight on barracks windows, bad coffee in paper cups, laughter during midnight watch, and a young Marine from Georgia who used to call Ghost. A snowstorm with teeth and a church heart. Michael had trained with them here before deployment. Michael had been the one who fed Ghost apple slices when nobody was looking. Michael had been the one who said, "If I ever do not make it back, you make sure that dog finds home." Jared opened his eyes and found Ghost staring up at him. The dog's amber gaze was steady, almost forgiving. Jared knelt in the wet sand. He untied the paper from the collar with careful fingers, unfolding it one slow corner at a time. Inside was not a long letter, just a small photograph sealed in plastic, worn at the edges, showing 3 figures beside kennel number 6. Jared in uniform, Michael grinning with one hand on Ghost's head, and Ghost sitting between them like he had been guarding both souls at once. On the back, written in fading ink, were 6 words. "Take him home when I cannot." The photograph in Jared's hand trembled slightly as he looked down at it, the early morning mist curling around his boots like a soft blanket, the air crisp and carrying the faint smell of wet pine and gravel. Ghost nudged his leg gently, the warmth of his white fur pressing against Jared's calf, a reminder that the bond between them had never weakened despite months apart. The small yard beyond the gate seemed ordinary at first glance. Empty runs, puddled sand, faded paint on the training obstacles. Yet every inch held echoes of memory, of commands given, of silent signals shared, of laughter and quiet moments under the sun. Jared carefully replaced the photograph in his pocket and let his eyes sweep the space, taking in the scattered footprints, the pattern of wet gravel, the way the morning light fell through the chain-link fence, touching the dew in tiny flickers. Ghost sat with perfect posture, tail wrapped neatly, head high, amber eyes scanning the yard as if he could see the passage of time itself, every second a measure of loyalty preserved. Jared crouched low, hand extended to scratch between Ghost's ears, feeling the lean muscle beneath the fur, the heartbeat steady and strong, and he whispered, "It is all right, boy. We are together now." Ghost responded with a soft exhale, the kind that spoke of release and recognition, and he pressed closer, nudging Jared's hand with the tip of his wet nose. Around them, the sounds of the base began to fill in the edges of the world, the distant rev of engines starting their morning rounds, the shuffle of boots on asphalt, the faint chatter of Marines arriving for duty. But within this small bubble, there was only the unspoken dialogue of trust between man and dog. Jared stood slowly, letting Ghost circle him once before settling again. The dog's movements measured, deliberate, each step a silent echo of past trainings and missions. The tag on Ghost's collar glinted in the soft light, soaked slightly from the lingering mist, yet the small scrawled words still held the weight of intention, a final promise entrusted from one life to another, bridging absence and presence with quiet certainty. Jared inhaled deeply, the cold air filling his lungs, carrying with it the faint scent of the nearby Atlantic, a mixture of salt and wet wood, mingling with the earthy tang of pine and sand. Ghost's ears flicked at every sound, alert yet calm, and his eyes never left Jared's face, amber orbs reflecting patience, loyalty, and the quiet joy of reunion. The small fence that had once separated them from the world of training now seemed a threshold, a marker not of confinement, but of passage from lost to presence. Jared unclipped the leash he had brought, letting Ghost move freely in the yard, and the dog paced once, then stopped at a familiar corner, sniffing at the ground, tail sweeping low but alert. Jared followed slowly, every movement measured, aware that each step mattered, that the day held more than sunlight or routine, but the resumption of a story paused only by circumstance. The wet gravel crunched softly beneath their feet as they approached the old agility course, the faded colors of tunnels and hurdles catching the light, a visual memory of countless drills, commands, and moments of silent understanding. Ghost paused at the center of the course, chest heaving slightly, gaze fixed on Jared, and in that moment, time seemed to contract, folding the months of separation, the days of waiting, and the quiet longing into a single heartbeat. Jared knelt and extended both hands, allowing Ghost to step closer, the dog brushing against him with the full weight of loyalty and trust. Around them, the morning mist swirled, sunlight breaking through in scattered beams, highlighting the wet sheen on Ghost's coat, the damp sand, the faint glimmer of dew on chain links. Jared's voice was soft, even in the quiet of the awakening base. "We will make it through, together." And Ghost responded with a small, rolling whine, a sound that carried no urgency, only recognition and affirmation. In that yard, the space between past and present, absence and reunion, seemed to collapse, leaving only two beings aligned in purpose and understanding. Every movement, every gaze, every subtle shift of weight between Jared and Ghost conveyed a depth of communication words could never reach, a reminder that even after time and distance, fidelity and patience endure, and the smallest gestures hold the weight of decades. Jared let his hand linger on the side of Ghost's neck, feeling the warmth, the pulse of life, the unspoken promise of protection and companionship. The mist lifted gradually, revealing the expanse of the yard, yet the world beyond remained secondary, muted, insignificant against the gravity of this reunion. Ghost settled finally, laying his head lightly against Jared's knee, amber eyes half closed, tail flicking in a slow rhythm that matched the quiet rise and fall of his chest. Jared leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently to the top of Ghost's head, the damp fur cool beneath his touch, and he felt the long weeks of worry, separation, and uncertainty dissolve into a steady, enduring presence, a quiet miracle born not of circumstance, but of loyalty and love steadfastly kept. The sun had fully risen now, spilling pale gold across the wet gravel of the Marine Corps base, casting long shadows from the chain-link fences and signaling the start of routine morning activity. Jared Thompson led Ghost through the yard toward the small transport vehicle waiting near the edge of the training area, the dog moving with quiet confidence, paws silent on the damp asphalt, ears alert to every shift in wind or distant footstep. The vehicle's engine hummed softly, a low resonance that seemed to reassure Ghost as he circled once, tail high, amber eyes tracking Jared's every motion. The photograph and tag had been secured in Jared's pocket, a tangible link to the past and a promise kept in ink and memory. As they approached, other Marines began to notice, pausing in their duties, some leaning against guardrails, others halting on their morning runs, all sensing that this was more than an ordinary routine. Ghost paused at the rear of the vehicle, sitting deliberately, chest rising and falling with steady breaths, tail sweeping slowly in measured arcs, signaling that it was time to proceed. Jared opened the back door and knelt, allowing Ghost to step inside first, the dog moving without hesitation, settling on the rubber mat with precision, then turning to look at Jared as if to say, "I am ready." The smell of the interior, warmed by residual engine heat and faint traces of leather and oil, mingled with the cool outdoor air, carrying with it the scent of anticipation and purpose. Jared slid inside, closing the door gently, the vehicle rocking slightly as Ghost shifted to accommodate him, keeping a respectful distance yet maintaining proximity. The drive began slowly, wheels crunching over gravel as the vehicle turned toward the old kennels at the far side of the base, the wind pushing past open vents, carrying with it the scent of pine, wet asphalt, and the faint salt tang from the nearby Atlantic. Ghost's head lifted occasionally, ears pivoting, nostrils flaring as he tracked the smells and subtle changes in temperature, each breath deliberate, each movement signaling awareness and readiness. Jared's hands rested lightly on the bench beside him, watching Ghost, feeling the steady rhythm of trust, the calm pulse of loyalty that had guided them through countless days and nights apart. He recalled the nights in Kandahar, the quiet moments after long patrols, when Ghost had curled at his side under the desert sky, amber eyes reflecting starlight, reminding him that presence itself could be a balm to weary souls. As the vehicle approached the gates leading to the temporary holding kennels, Ghost rose, tail flicking once, stepping toward the door with measured grace, then pausing, glancing back at Jared as if asking for permission. Jared exhaled slowly, a hand extended in silent acknowledgement, and Ghost continued, slipping through the small gate and onto the damp grass of the kennel area. The yard smelled of wet sand, old wood, faint traces of disinfectant, and the subtle scent of previous occupants, all familiar to Ghost, all marking the territory of homecoming and reunion. Jared followed, letting the sound of his boots on grass be a soft counterpoint to Ghost's confident steps. The dog paused at the center of the yard, amber eyes scanning the empty runs, the faded obstacles, the small puddles formed from morning mist. He lowered his head and nudged Jared forward with a gentle pressure of his snout, guiding him toward the farthest run, where a single kennel door stood ajar, revealing a small, familiar space within. Jared's heart tightened as he recognized the contours of the kennel, worn edges of wooden beams, and the faint imprint of previous training exercises. Ghost entered first, chest close to the ground, moving with reverence, ears forward, alert, tail low but not tucked, every movement carrying the weight of 7 days of waiting and months of devotion. Jared knelt at the edge of the entrance, hand extended once more, and Ghost turned, head lifting to meet his gaze, amber eyes reflecting quiet triumph and relief. The mist had lifted entirely now, sun warming the wet grass and glistening off Ghost's white coat, each strand catching the light, as if affirming that patience and fidelity had their reward. The distant sounds of the base, shuffling feet, distant radios, muted conversations, receded into insignificance, leaving only the synchronized rhythm of breaths and the silent acknowledgement of reunion. Ghost settled near the back wall of the kennel, lying down with deliberate care, then turned his head to nudge Jared's hand once again. Jared rested it lightly on the top of his companion's head, feeling warmth, steadiness, and the unspoken promise that the days ahead would be shared, that separation had ended, and that loyalty had been recognized and returned. In that simple, sunlit yard, the weight of absence and the grace of reunion mingled, each breath, each touch, each gaze a testament to the enduring bond between Marine and K9, a quiet miracle born not of ceremony, but of trust unwavering, patience tested, and love steadfast. By late morning, the base had settled into its working rhythm, but the small kennel yard remained hushed, as though everyone who passed knew better than to disturb what had been found there. Jared Thompson sat on the low wooden step outside kennel number 6 with Ghost stretched beside him, the white K9 resting one paw across Jared's boot, as if making certain the Marine would not disappear again. The sun warmed the damp boards. Steam lifted faintly from the wet grass. Somewhere beyond the training field, a bugle call floated through the air, clear and silver, then faded into the soft murmur of engines and distant voices. Jared held the old photograph in both hands, turning it carefully, looking again at Michael Reeves's handwriting on the back. Take him home when I cannot. 6 words. No decoration. No explanation. Just a trust placed in another man's hands. Ghost raised his head when Jared breathed out, ears lifting at the small change in his body. The dog had always known when silence became too heavy. He nudged Jared's wrist once, then pressed his nose against the edge of the photograph, gentle as a prayer. Jared swallowed hard and whispered, "You remembered him better than I did you not?" Ghost did not answer, not in the way people expect answers. He simply lowered his chin onto Jared's knee, and somehow that was enough. A shadow fell across the kennel entrance. It was Captain Daniel Mercer, the base operations officer, a gray-haired Marine with a square face, calm eyes, and the quiet manner of a man who never used a loud voice unless the moment truly required it. Beside him stood Dr. Emily Hart, the civilian veterinarian assigned to the base K9 program, carrying a small medical case in one hand and a scanner in the other. Her boots were clean but damp at the toes, her brown hair pulled back beneath a navy cap. Her expression softened the moment. She saw Ghost's paw still holding Jared in place. Captain Mercer removed his cover and held it at his side. "Staff Sergeant Thompson," he said, "we checked the intake records. Ghost was transferred out after the memorial review last winter. Somewhere along the paperwork trail, he was marked as retired and placed with a temporary handler near Wilmington. 2 weeks ago, that handler reported he had gone missing." Jared looked up slowly. "Missing?" Dr. Hart crouched a few feet away, keeping her movements small so Ghost would not feel crowded. "He crossed almost 90 miles, she said. Maybe more, depending on the route. No one knows how he found his way back here." Ghost's tail moved once, slow against the floor. Not pride, not excitement. Something steadier. Certainty. Jared looked down at the dog's worn paws for the first time with real attention. The pads were rough, darkened with road dust, and one front paw carried a shallow scrape already beginning to heal. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that needed alarm. But enough to tell the truth. Ghost had not been delivered to the gate. He had chosen it. He had walked there through heat, traffic noise, empty roads, strange yards, and lonely nights, guided by something no map could explain. Dr. Hart lifted the scanner gently. "May I?" Jared gave Ghost a soft command. Not sharp, not formal, just familiar. "Easy." Ghost watched the doctor, then leaned closer to Jared, allowing the scanner to pass over his shoulder. It beeped once. Dr. Hart checked the number against a folded paper from her pocket. Her face changed, not with surprise exactly, but with the look people get when a small missing piece suddenly makes a whole picture clear. "There is a secondary note tied to his identification record," she said. Captain Mercer glanced at her. "Read it." Dr. Hart hesitated, then spoke with care. "In the event that Lance Corporal Michael Reeves is no longer able to claim him, Ghost is to be released only to Staff Sergeant Jared Thompson, United States Marine Corps. Handler of record. Emergency family contact by bond designation." The yard went still. Even the distant sounds seemed to step back. Jared stared at her, unable to move. Bond designation. It was an old field category, rarely used, written for working dogs whose trust had been shaped by more than training schedules and assignment charts. It meant the dog had chosen a human so completely that separating them could break something no regulation could measure. Captain Mercer cleared his throat once, but his voice came out lower than before. Reeves filed that himself before deployment. Jared looked at Ghost. The white shepherd's amber eyes held steady, not asking for permission now, not pleading. Only waiting for Jared to understand what he had carried all this way. Not just a photograph, not just a message, a legal thread, a last act of care. Michael had known. Somehow, long before the base forgot, before the papers moved from desk to desk, before Ghost became a missing name in a system that had too many names, Michael had made sure the dog still had a road back to the man he trusted. Jared pressed his hand over his mouth for a moment, breathing through the ache in his chest. Then he lowered his forehead to Ghost's, careful and slow. The dog closed his eyes. Dr. Hart looked away first. Corporal Willis, standing near the gate, wiped at his face with the back of his hand and pretended it was the mist. Captain Mercer placed the old photograph on the kennel step beside Jared and said, "We can make the transfer official today." Jared did not lift his head. His hand moved to the side of Ghost's neck, fingers sinking into warm white fur. "No," he said softly. For a second, everyone looked at him. Jared opened his eyes, still touching the dog, and his voice steadied. "Not official. Sacred." Ghost gave one quiet breath, deep and trembling, and leaned all his weight into him. The afternoon sun had risen higher, scattering pale light across the yard, turning the damp grass to muted gold and casting long, soft shadows from the fences and training equipment. Ghost stretched once, long and deliberate, the white fur glistening faintly with moisture from the morning mist. Jared Thompson followed, careful not to rush, letting each step carry the weight of observation and presence. The yard had emptied slightly as routine activities drew other Marines into their duties, leaving a quiet expanse filled only with the soft sounds of movement, distant hum of engines, and the subtle rustle of wind through pine trees. Jared knelt beside Ghost, brushing a hand over the dog's shoulders, feeling the steady rise and fall of his chest, the warmth of life resilient and patient beneath his fingers. He looked toward the small kennels, each empty now, except for the one Ghost had claimed, a space imbued with history, loyalty, and the echoes of training days long past. The air carried faint scents of disinfectant, wet sand, and the lingering traces of other K9s who had passed through. But for Ghost and Jared, it was the stillness that mattered, the space where attention and recognition flowed between them without words. Ghost nudged Jared's side, a gentle prompt to move toward the center of the yard, and Jared obeyed slowly, letting the dog guide him along the familiar path, past faded obstacle courses, over soft puddles left from the morning mist, ears pricked and eyes focused. A light breeze ruffled the edges of Jared's jacket and swept across Ghost's back, lifting fur and carrying the scent of salt from the nearby Atlantic, mingling with pine and damp earth. Jared paused at the center, kneeling to bring his eyes level with Ghost's. Amber gaze meeting dark brown with an intensity that spoke of shared history and the weight of separation endured. The soft hum of base life became a distant echo, inconsequential to the gravity of the moment. Ghost's tail swished once, deliberate, signaling attentiveness and patience, then settled as if confirming that this space, this time, was theirs alone. Jared allowed himself to recall the past, the deployments in foreign lands, the early mornings of preparation, the long nights watching over the same stretches of terrain, and the silent understanding that had grown between him and Ghost through months of shared vigilance. He let the memory settle without judgment, acknowledging the journey that had brought them to this reunion, the road walked alone and together in equal measure. Ghost lay down, chest still rising with steady breaths, tail flicking slowly, and Jared rested his hands lightly atop the fur, feeling the pulse of loyalty and resilience that had not wavered. The air shifted slightly, carrying the faint aroma of the distant ocean, the softness of fallen pine needles, and the subtle hum of activity from the far side of the base. But the yard remained a pocket of calm, a sanctuary for reflection and reconnection. Jared inhaled deeply, the cold air filling his lungs with the scent of rain, pine, and damp earth, and he felt the weight of presence, the reassurance of fidelity, and the quiet miracle of patience rewarded. Ghost nudged the photograph Jared had placed on the step, the small piece of paper now dry, the ink slightly faded, yet its significance undiminished. Jared picked it up, feeling the smoothness of the paper, the edges worn from handling, and traced the writing slowly, committing it to memory. He set it carefully back down, letting Ghost settle once more, the dog's head resting lightly against his knee, amber eyes half closed but attentive, breathing steady and calm. The sun continued its arc, casting gentle warmth across the yard, illuminating the small details. The curve of Ghost's ears, the shine of his white coat, the soft lines of Jared's uniform, and the subtle, unspoken understanding that had survived absence, distance, and the passage of time. Around them, the world resumed its rhythm, yet the yard held them, suspended in a quiet narrative of loyalty, recognition, and the enduring bond between man and dog. Every glance, every touch, every subtle shift of weight carried meaning, a testament to patience kept, promises honored, and love expressed in the silent language of trust. Jared leaned forward, resting his forehead lightly against Ghost's, feeling the steady warmth and presence, and for a long moment, they remained in perfect stillness, the yard, the sun, and the base reduced to a quiet stage for a bond that had endured, survived, and finally returned to home. The afternoon had deepened into a warm golden light that filtered softly through the mist clinging to the edges of the base, turning the wet asphalt and grass into muted gold and green hues. Jared Thompson remained kneeling beside Ghost, the white German shepherd resting his head lightly against the Marine's thigh, ears relaxed, eyes partially closed, yet alert to every slight sound, every subtle movement in the yard. The wind carried the faint scent of pine and the salty tang of the Atlantic, mingling with the damp earth, creating a stillness that felt sacred, a space suspended between past, present, and what they had endured together. Ghost shifted once, lifting his head to nuzzle Jared's hand, amber eyes meeting dark brown, conveying a quiet affirmation, the trust and patience of 7 days of waiting condensed into a single gaze. Jared traced the lines of Ghost's face with slow fingers, feeling the warmth, the steady pulse of life, the comfort that only a companion of such fidelity could provide. Beyond the yard, the base continued its rhythm, the soft hum of engines starting, the distant chatter of Marines preparing for their duties. But here, in this small pocket of calm, only the shared presence of man and dog mattered. Jared allowed himself to breathe deeply, letting the weight of absence, separation, and worry dissolve in the warmth of the sun and the solid steadiness of Ghost beside him. The photograph from Michael Reeves lay nearby, its edges curling slightly from earlier damp, but it held its meaning, a silent testament to promises kept, bonds honored, and the path back to one another safeguarded by trust. Ghost rose deliberately, stretching his legs and back, fur gleaming in the soft sunlight, and moved a few steps toward the center of the yard, pausing to sniff at the ground, alert but calm, every motion deliberate and measured, an embodiment of patience rewarded. Jared followed, hand lightly brushing the dog's back, feeling the subtle strength beneath the fur, the quiet rhythm of his companion's heartbeat, the unspoken communication that needed no words, only attention and presence. Around them, shadows from fences and equipment shifted with the light, the mist lifting gradually, revealing the contours of the yard, the faded paint of the training obstacles, and the soft glint of dew on the metal gate. Ghost returned to Jared, nudging his side, settling again with a slow, gentle exhale, eyes half closed, yet conveying every ounce of awareness, every fraction of devotion, every measure of loyalty preserved across months of distance. Jared pressed his forehead briefly against the top of Ghost's head, feeling the damp warmth, the soft fur, the living affirmation of reunion, and in that touch, the full weight of trust and patience returned to him, a quiet miracle in the ordinary morning. The sounds of the base faded further into the background, engines, voices, and the distant clatter of boots merging into a gentle murmur, leaving only the synchronized breathing of man and dog, the soft rustle of wind, and the warmth of sunlight stretching across wet grass and golden fur. Jared exhaled slowly, hands resting lightly on Ghost's shoulders, the pulse of steady loyalty beneath his fingertips, and allowed the mind to absorb the significance of the day, the journey, and the restoration of what had been lost. The small yard, the sun, the gentle movement of mist and wind, and the quiet presence of a steadfast companion all coalesced into a singular moment, timeless yet fleeting, profound in its simplicity and depth. Ghost shifted slightly, tail brushing gently against Jared's side, head lifting to look up with amber eyes clear and unwavering, acknowledging the understanding and the promise that neither absence nor distance could diminish. The warmth of the sunlight increased gradually, casting a soft glow over white fur and tanned skin, highlighting the curves and lines of both dog and marine, painting the scene in subtle gold and green, a living tableau of reunion, patience, and devotion. Jared lowered his hand slowly, letting it rest over Ghost's head and neck, feeling the strength and presence beneath, and allowed a quiet smile to cross his face. The weight of months lifted, replaced with a calm certainty that loyalty endures, trust returns, and the smallest acts of devotion carry the greatest weight. Around them, the yard remained quiet, mist lifting completely now, shadows shifting with the day, and in that golden light, man and dog shared a silence filled with meaning, a space where absence, hope, patience, and reunion merged into the simplest and most profound acknowledgement of connection and fidelity. The day began to soften at the edges, turning from bright afternoon into that quiet hour when sunlight loses its sharpness and everything on the base seems to breathe a little slower. Jared Thompson stood beside the open gate of the West training yard with Ghost at his left knee, the white K9 calm now, no longer pulling toward a hidden memory, no longer waiting outside a boundary he could not cross alone. The paper note, the photograph, and the collar tag rested in a small, clear evidence sleeve that Captain Mercer had provided, not because anyone doubted the truth, but because some promises deserved to be protected carefully. Dr. Emily Hart finished checking Ghost one last time near the kennel step, her hand gentle along his front paw, her voice soft as she said, "He is tired, Staff Sergeant, but he is strong. A few days of rest, real food, and a safe place will do more than medicine." Jared nodded, though his eyes never left Ghost. The dog stood still through the exam, patient and dignified, but the moment Dr. Hart stepped back, he leaned against Jared's leg again, shoulder pressed to uniform cloth, as if his whole world had narrowed to that single point of contact. Across the yard, Marines had begun to gather without being ordered. Corporal Ben Willis stood near the fence. Two younger privates paused beside the supply building. A sergeant from the K9 unit removed his cap and held it in both hands. No one spoke loudly. No one needed to. The story had moved across the base in whispers, and now the whispers had become silence. Captain Mercer walked toward Jared with a folded form on a clipboard, but he did not hand it over right away. He looked down at Ghost, then toward kennel number 6, where the old metal nameplate still caught the fading light. "There are regulations," he said quietly. "There are records, transfers, signatures, all of it. We will handle them." Jared looked at him. Captain Mercer's expression softened. "But before any of that, there is what is right." He placed the clipboard on the kennel step and took a small brass tag from his pocket. It had been cleaned, but not polished so much that history disappeared. Jared recognized it immediately. Michael Reeves had once tied it to Ghost's training collar with a strip of black cord, joking that every good Marine needed a little extra identification in case heaven got crowded. On the front was Ghost's name. On the back, small and uneven, were 3 words. "Bring him home." Jared's throat tightened, but he did not look away. Ghost lifted his nose toward the tag, sniffed once, then gave a low sound that was not sadness and not joy, but something deeper, something that seemed to come from the old places where memory lives. Jared crouched, and Captain Mercer placed the tag in his palm. The metal was warm from the captain's hand. For a moment, Jared simply held it, feeling its weight, feeling how something so small could carry a whole life of loyalty. Then he fastened it beside Ghost's identification tag, carefully, slowly, making sure the ring closed all the way. When it settled against the collar, Ghost stepped forward and rested his chin on Jared's shoulder. The movement was gentle, almost tired. Jared wrapped one arm around him, and the yard disappeared into quiet. The Marines watching did not cheer. They did not clap. They only stood there, some looking down, some blinking hard, some staring past the fences toward the lowering sun. The base flag moved in the breeze with a soft snap of fabric. Somewhere far off, a truck door closed. A gull cried above the coastal road. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary light. Yet in the middle of all of it, something holy had happened without ceremony. A dog had come back to the place where love was promised. A man had finally understood that he had not been forgotten. And a friend who was no longer there had still managed to keep them together. Jared rose with one hand on Ghost's collar, and this time when he walked toward the main road, Ghost followed without looking back. They passed through the gate together, not as a handler and a working dog returning to duty, not as a Marine taking possession of property. They moved like family. Corporal Willis opened the passenger door of Jared's truck, an old dark blue Ford with dust on the tires and a folded blanket across the seat. Ghost paused at the running board, looked once toward the training yard, then stepped up carefully and settled inside. Jared stood outside the open door, watching him circle twice before lying down with a deep, relieved breath. The brass tag touched the old collar and made the softest sound. A small click. A final period at the end of a long, unfinished sentence. Jared climbed in beside him, but before starting the engine, he placed the photograph on the dashboard where the evening light could reach it. Michael's grin, Jared's younger face, Ghost between them, all three caught forever in a moment before time asked for payment. Jared touched 2 fingers to the picture, then rested that same hand on Ghost's head. "We are going home," he whispered. Ghost closed his eyes. Outside, the Marines stood along the road as the truck rolled forward, not saluting by command, but standing in respect because their hearts knew the difference. The gate receded behind them, its iron bars turning gold in the sunset. Ghost slept before they reached the first stoplight, his breathing slow, his body finally trusting that the waiting was over. Jared drove with both hands steady on the wheel, the road ahead glowing under the last light of day. And for the first time in months, the empty seat beside him did not feel empty anymore. Some promises do not end when voices fade. Some find their way through rain, through miles, through 7 long days at a gate. And sometimes grace arrives quietly, wearing white fur, carrying an old tag, and choosing the one soul who still needs to be brought home.